Cool. So this is essentially just covering the article by Mike Archer called "Ordering the Vegetarian Meal." There's more animal blood on your hands. I've made a server to essentially just deal with all of the claims that he puts in. And I've segmented all of the relevant points into various channels. And I'm essentially just going to run it past Avi, see if everything I've written more or less sounds good, or if he's got any questions or anything that he finds being problematic as per what I've stated. So yeah.
All right, let's do it.
All right, cool. And I'll just send you an invite. So just in general. All right. So the first is a part that I think you've already covered. It's essentially under misinterpretation of mouse plague area. I went through a slightly different route than what you've gone down, but it gets to sort of the same problem, which is essentially that Archer states in his article, each area of grain production in Australia has a mouse plague on average every 4 years. He seems to misinterpret the literature he cites. I've provided the link in the channel, but this is I will also provide a screenshot. Here, just in general. So this is the actual screenshot of the article that he's quoting, and in it they say Australian crops are damaged by mice, black rats, blah blah blah, and it states essentially there's been a mouse plague somewhere in the Australian grain belt every 4 years on average since 1900. Now, obviously, this is the same problem that you've noted, which is that he thinks that every single hectare of grain production in Australia is subject to a mouse plague over 4 years. Instead, it states that it's been subject to somewhere in Australia, the grain belt has been subject to a plague every 4 years. To put in a comparison, that's essentially like saying the 22 million hectares of grain production that occurs in Australia, all of it at some point over 4 years undergoes a plague.
That would be a lot of plague.
Yeah. So, however, and I think you actually found this study for me, there's a more direct statement from a government document, which finds that it's actually about 100,000 to 500,000 every year. Mike Archer's estimation would give us closer to 5.5 million. So that's a disparity of around 11 to 5, depending on the big end or the low end, I guess, depending on which end you go for. All good?
So the difference is its difference is, so it's 22 million hectares undergoing a plague for 4 years, or 5.5 million annually, or 500,000 annually at the most, realistically.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to just saying like, okay, well, everywhere grain is grown, you get a plague every 4 years.
Yeah. And that's actually covered in. There's a table coming up later, which I'll cover, which actually goes through the frequency as well. One of the studies actually has the frequency, so it's actually increased to about 4 years from about 9 years. But yeah, we'll just move on. So the next channel is deaths per 100 kilograms of protein. So with the part that you put in your channel, I think you just assumed that all of Archer's other calculations are correct, and it's still problematic. I sort of looked through the underlying statements that he made, and that still comes out problematic. But there's just going to be a disparity. So with what you've got in your channel versus what's in mine, there's going to be a disparity, but that's just because we've gone about it in a couple of different routes. But yeah, so I've sort of written out the calculations. If you've got any issues, just let me know. But I'll try and run through it. If there's any confusion or anything, just let me know. The 500 to 100,000 hectares a year undergoing plague, as we've covered. Archer states in his article that 1,000 to 500 mice per hectare is the sort of population during a plague. And he references this article. And it's a little bit strange because in the actual article, the table that is there gives different variations to what he stated. So he's given a range of 500 to 1,000. But as you can see in the table, the minor plagues are 200 to 800 and the major plague is 800 plus. And the highest number that they've got is 2,700 plus. But he seems to have gone for a round number of 500 to 1,000. So I've just continued using that just to sort of remain consistent with his calculations. Okay. Yep. And he's also calculated that around 80% of the mice are killed in the eradication process, but I'm going to two different ends, so the less charitable and the more charitable. So for the less charitable to the vegans, I'm going for the full 100% eradication. And for the more charitable, I'm going for the 80%. The 22 million hectares of grain is something we've already covered. And Archer has used on average calculation of 1.4 tons per hectare yield per year. And he gets that from this paper, which I'll post. Sorry, that's the wrong page. It'll be that second page is relevant for a bit later, but this page specifically. So he seems to have averaged it out to about 1.4 based on the bottom table.
1.4 what? What are the units?
1.4 tons per hectare.
Okay.
Let me know if you're happy for me to go on.
Yeah, go on. So 1.4 tons of hectare, and this is grain per hectare of grain grown. I'm not sure if this is corn or soy or whatnot.
I think it's just grain is like the whole. It's a broad
like an
statement.
Average.
It seems. Yeah, it's a broad statement without going into like which specific type.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's the protein percentage for wheat, which is the one that he's using as his sort of reference point, is 13%, which is I can get you a statement, but it's a pretty easily accessible number. So using the anti-vegetarian end of the figures or the anti-vegan, it's the 500,000 hectares, which we've covered, times the 1,000 mice year, 1,000 mice in each of those hectares killed per year, which gives you about 500 million mice killed per year in pest control. The tons of wheat protein from wheat is 30 million times the 13% protein, which gives us just over 4 million tons of protein. If we then input the 500 million mice times the one is the kill percentage, so all of them are killed, divided by the 4 million tons of protein from the wheat, you get 12.5 animals killed per 100 kilograms of protein, which is less than the amount that Mike Archer's calculations got, which is around, I think he said 55 times more. So he calculated about 2.2 animals are killed for, 2.2 cows are killed for 100 kilograms of protein. And he calculated about 55 times as many animals are killed in crop deaths to produce plant-based food. Does that all make sense?
So that would be like 100 or and change animals.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, about that. Yeah.
And you've come up with what?
You've come 12.5.
12.5. Okay. And is that correction? Is that correction based on the difference with the plague, or is it with the? Is there more that has been done to get that discrepancy?
So I think a lot of that is basically just the difference in the area assumption. So he's obviously got the area assumption of the 5.5 million versus the 500,000 at most.
Okay, cool. So that'll be it's off by around like a factor of 10.
I think I calculated 77%, but yeah, there's a lower end calculation as well.
77. Wait, you're calculating. Hold on. You're getting 12, and if I'm maybe
12.5 animals killed. So he's estimated over 100.
That's not 77% discrepancy. That's over 700% of a discrepancy. It's around it's almost a factor of 10. Because look,
I don't know if I'm saying it wrong.
10,
that's all right. I'll just sorry, go on.
No worries.
No, you're right. So actually, that's I'll edit that later. I'll make a note. It is a factor of 10.
Okay,
cool. I think I might have misinterpreted. I'll check it again, and I'll just if what you stated is correct, then I'll just update that. I don't know if I've misinterpreted something along the way, but it sounds like I've understated it anyway. So I'll update that. Are you happy to move on to the sort of more pro-vegan? Yep, cool. So the more pro-vegan end of the figures is 100,000 hectares by the 500 mice per hectare, which gives us 50 million mice infecting the country in a plague in a year, and we assume 80% are killed. We've got the 4 million tons of protein. So it's the 50 million mice times 0.8, which is the eradication rate, divided by the 4 million tons of protein, which gives us less than one animal killed per 100 kilograms of protein. So that's less than the 2.2 animals that Mike Archer's calculation gives for the beef. And I'll have to update probably the 55 times less.
Wait, so are you telling me that you go from 12 animals killed per 100 kilograms of protein to less than one just by going from a kill rate of 100% to 80%?
So there's a few changes. I've gone from the 500,000 is the upper range of the land. The 100,000 is the lowest, is like the least plague area.
Wait, 500. What are the units? So the 500,000 is what?
Hectares.
Okay, hectares of that grain are being grown on.
That get plagued. Yep.
Hectares that get plagued. Oh, okay. Or that are subject to plague. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Versus the more vegetarian end of the figures is 100,000. So that's the
I see.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
It's looking at a difference between okay, now this makes sense. Yeah, looking at a difference between what area of land is suspect or subject to plague. Okay.
Yes. Yep. So that would be I guess a less plague-prone year is one way you could put it. And then the 500 is the lower end of the mice in each of those hectares that Mike Archer has assumed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So on the higher end, he's got 1,000. On the lower end, he's got 500. So in total, that gives us about 50 million mice that are of concern for plague. And he's assumed that 80% are killed during our action to essentially eradicate them.
Okay.
Cool.
And what do we get? And with those assumptions, we get less than one animal killed per 100 kilograms of protein.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Which is important because that's actually less. Yeah, that's less than the amount of animals that would be killed for cattle if we only ate cows.
Correct. Yeah. It gets a bit funny with the next one. Cool. Are you happy with that? Happy to move on to to the next subject? Yep.
Yeah, cool. Sure.
All right. So in this, it's this is where the second page that I originally shared comes in. Where do you want me to share it with you? Where are you in? Just so you can see
You can, for the audience, you could post, if you could post it to general chat in the AY Discord.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's being recorded.
Cool. All right, cool. All right. So this is the second page from the reference that Archer uses. If people open that up and just look at the green table, and it's in that it's actually got domestic use and exports as well. So in domestic use, you've got a yearly domestic use of wheat production and exports, and in that you've got a breakdown of feed and also food/industrial. If you look at the top, it's 2003, 2004, all the way up to 2007. If you actually, look at those numbers at the start of 2003, at the start of the table, it's actually almost a 1-for-1 split, and then as you get to 2007, it's a higher split for 3,500 to 2,242. So that is actually the use of wheat domestically in Australia. So what I've stated is that domestically, approximately 54% of the wheat and the grain that's used in Australia is used for animal agriculture. And if we were to attribute the deaths that occur in these crops for plague eradication, would actually attribute 54% of it to crop-related deaths versus 35% for direct human consumption.
Right, that wouldn't affect the animals killed per 100 kilograms of protein,
though. It might, because he hasn't assumed, unless I'm getting it wrong, he seems to have attributed all of the deaths to plant-based agriculture, as far as I can see.
Well, the idea is just that if you're growing wheat, you need a certain amount of. The reason it's not going to affect it is because it's a ratio. So you have like a certain amount that of wheat you're going to grow. You need a certain amount of land to grow it. You're going to decide like, okay, well, there's a certain amount of animals that are going to be killed per hectare, regardless of whether I grow it for cattle or whether I grow it for humans. No matter how much of it I grow, whether I grow little or a lot, the ratio of how many animals that will be killed per 100 grams of protein is just going to remain the same. Now, how many total animals get killed could be different, because you may grow less of it, because you're not going to grow as much of it. If you're not doing it for animals, you're only doing it for humans, you may end up growing less of it. But the ratio of how many animals are killed per protein produced is going to be the same.
Maybe, and I'm not sure if I'm tracking that part, but I'll run this by you, and you let me know if there's an issue.
Sure.
So my understanding is that Archer has assumed that all of the grain that's used in these figures is used for essentially human consumption, and as such, all of the plague that occurs in this for the production of this food can be attributed to plant-based consumption by humans directly, whereas it looks like a large amount of it is actually used to feed animal agriculture. So the underlying figures of how much plague that occurs and the animals that need to be killed for that plague could be effectively halved, because it's actually not the same amount. The amount that are killed aren't all killed to protect human-based foods. And so for me, it would
right. No, I understand that. Yeah. But the thing I'm saying, so unless there's like a difference in the rate of plague proneness in areas of land that are growing grain for animal agriculture versus areas of land that are grown for human agriculture, it wouldn't affect the ratio of animals killed per kilogram of protein produced. What it would affect is, again, unless that difference is there, what it would affect is the total number of animals killed that are attributable to crop production for human consumption. That would change, trivially it would change, because there's less of it being done. More of it's being, a slice of that pie is being used for animal agriculture. But if you ask the question, the only thing I was saying there is if you simply ask the question, well, what is the ratio of animals killed for wheat per this amount of wheat produced? Well, that ratio is going to be the same regardless of if it's being grown for humans or animals, unless there's something different about the land that's being grown for humans and the land that's being grown for animals in terms of their plague proneness or something like that.
I don't know if I'm not understanding what you're saying.
I mean, we don't have, yeah, we can.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, yeah, basically all I'm saying is that, like let's say, let's just like real simple. Let's just say like I have 10 hectares of land and I could produce 1,000 grams of let's say I produce like 1,000 grams of protein and I kill 1,000 animals, right? Let's go with those numbers, right? Hypothetically, You following me? Yep. Now let's say it turns out that I actually produced 50 grams of cattle and 50 grams for humans. So in fact, I've used half of the land for animal agriculture purposes, and I've used the other half of land for human purposes. Following so far?
Yep.
Now, if I ask, well, what's the ratio of animals killed to kilograms of protein produced? It's going to be 1 regardless, because if I produced 1,000 using 1,000 hectares, the ratio is just going to be 1 to 1. For every hectare I produced 1,000. And if it turns out that I split the hectares 50-50, well, then it's just going to be 500 hectares to 500 grams of protein. And so that's going to be 1 to 1 also, even if you account for the animal agriculture. Because
okay, so are you saying if we, regardless of how it's being used, per 100 kilograms of protein production, the amount is going to remain the same, or the ratio is going to, I guess, with the
ratio would be the ratio will be the same unless there's something different about the plague proneness or whatnot in those two modes of production. Because if they're the same, then the ratio is just going to stay the same. The total amount will be different. So, for example, if I'm going to kill 500, there's only, in my example I gave you, there's only 500 attributable deaths instead of 1,000 attributable deaths for feeding people with plants. But the ratio of how many are killed is still 1 to 1.
All right. I'll try and I might just type it out in chat because I'm not sure if I'm tracking. Yeah, the point I'm obviously pointing out is that Archer has made assumptions for death rates that all of the land is attributable to human-based consumption, but you're stating that on 100 kilogram per protein basis, it won't actually matter. The ratio just follows through and remains the same unless it's a differentiating factor between the two.
Yeah, the rate. If you mean rate as in the total amount per time or something like that, yeah, that's going to change. That's absolutely going to change. If you're talking about the ratio, that's not going to change.
Okay. I might have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, we can discuss that further after. Yeah, no worries.
All right, cool, no problem. Cool. I did, for the sake of the point, so I did point out that also around 12.6 metric tons in Australia is used, of that 8.8 million is used for animal feeding, and flour milling is 2.8 million metric tons. So that's a factor of So that's about two-thirds of the grain production in Australia is used for animal feeding. But we can move on to the next part.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in the next part, I've essentially just got several examples of rodent control for animal agriculture. So although he discusses sort of like the plant agriculture related animal deaths, there's no mention about any sort of deaths in processing and protection of stock in animal agriculture. This can include foxes, cats, and rodents. And I've put in several examples of pest control, specifically rodent control, that exist in Australia, which he's not. And I understand to an extent that he might not have had good numbers available, but I think it's a little bit. I think he's done the discussion a bit of a disservice by not producing evidence of the fact that we do have to engage in pest control, or people in animal agriculture do have to engage in pest control. And yeah, I've put in several examples of that just in the channel pest control.
And do you know how much that, is there any way that you've come to know like how much that can affect the estimate, or do we just not know that?
I don't have a quantification, so I'll just straight up say that.
Okay, cool.
I'm just saying that even as a side note, it would have been, I think, a bit more true if he at least pointed out that this is something that occurs, and it's widely known and available information that it occurs and it has to occur, but he hasn't stated there's no quantification as far as I'm aware.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Cool. So, just for a bit of reference, I've decided to also put in the amount of animals killed in animal agriculture in Australia. So, just chickens alone, it's around 650 million, and that was in the year of 2019. And in the year that he published his paper, 2011, it was closer to about 550 million. And there's some further calculations relating to kangaroos needing to be killed and a potentially plant-based vegan system, which we can calculate rodents being killed at least, and use that as a reference point. So yeah. 650 million is sort of the number to beat or to go under. And I've got the section called Welcome to Kangas Needed to Be Killed for Protein Replacement. So in that, I've got the kangaroo nutrition facts. So here. So the protein per 100 grams of raw meat seems to be pretty similar for kangaroo to say like beef or chicken. It's around 21 grams. So yeah, feel free to pipe up if you've got any corrections or anything else that you want to add in. Archer states that in a follow-up paper that 12 kilograms of meat is produced from a kangaroo carcass. So this is actually a paper that he co-authored, which I've put the citation in. And the consumption of land animal meat has been at approximately 100 kilograms per person per year for the last 15 years in Australia. And I'll put in a couple of those. And these are Australian government statistics. And obviously, Archer proposes that we replace meat consumption with standard meat consumption with kangaroos instead. So if we had to replace approximately 100 kilograms of meat by the 25 million Australian population, that would be about 2.5 billion kilograms of consumed meat a year, divided by the 12 kilograms per kangaroo, which gives us 208 million kangaroos that need to be killed per year to replace that meat consumption. So that's just in general. Let me know if you've got any issues with that.
So so you're saying, if I have this right, you need to kill 208 million kangaroos to sustain the current meat consumption if you were to get it from kangaroos instead of cattle.
Instead of any meat, land-based meat.
Including any land-based meat, including
so poultry, beef and veal, pig meat, and sheep meat, and fish is a smaller amount in Australia. But yeah, so it's approximately 100 kilograms per year. The sheep, so the fish consumption has gone up, but it's still around 90 to 100 kilograms per year per person, and 25 million people in Australia. So yeah.
Okay, so over 100 million kangaroos.
Over 200 million.
Oh, sorry, 200 million. And this is for Australia or worldwide?
Just Australia.
Just Australia. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, 200 million kangaroos.
Yeah. And so the most recent survey that they've got, I think they stopped taking the population of the kangaroo stats. So the most recent one we've got is from 2011, which gives us around 34 million. That's the upper range. So just to put that into context, Australia kills about 31 million sheep a year, and a large part of the push that Archer goes with this is the sort of humane part of it. And for me, I don't really see, from a discussion point, I don't really see how Australia would process 570,000 kangaroos per day. That's no weekends, no public holidays, working 365 days a year. Without instances of abuse, and I don't really see pragmatically how that's going to occur without some sort of larger industrial size system. That is how we process pigs. That's how we generally tend to keep and process sheep, and we would have to have 7 times the amount of sheep that we process the amount 7 times the amount of sheep that we currently process, and even with that relatively small number. There's several instances of abuse, and I've got a trigger warning for the videos and the links that I put on, but I've essentially just got a few links of examples of abuse of treating sheep that are coming in for slaughter in Australia. And keep in mind, we're only killing 30 odd million of them a year, whereas Archer's numbers would propose probably closer to 210 million kangaroos per year. So I don't see how that doesn't occur without large instances of abuse and industrialization. So yeah, it's just a sort of thought process for me. Cool. Any questions or anything like that?
Nope, go on.
Cool. So I've also calculated out the amount of land killed, or amount of land used or required to feed a plant-based Australian population, and also a hypothetical amount of crop plague-related deaths in Australia. So this is just using the Elementa study, which has a sort of hectare per person per year. And in that, I think you'll probably be familiar with it, where the vegans require about 0.13 hectares per person per year. And I scaled it up to 30 million Australians. So that gives us a figure of 3.9 million hectares, which is less than the land required to produce grains for animals in animal agriculture currently in Australia.
Okay, so what's the takeaway point here? So you'd only need 3.9 million hectares.
Yeah, I've also got estimated plague-related deaths as well. But yeah, the 3.9 is the estimated land required to feed more than Australia's population. A little bit more than 20% more than.
And this is if you're just growing plants.
Yeah, if you were to move everyone to a plant-based diet.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, I see what you did here. Okay, you went, and you took the you went with the 0.13 for vegan, presumably.
Yep. Do you want me to post the study?
I think no, that makes sense. Yeah, I'm familiar with the elementary study. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay.
All right. And I used the earlier numbers that we had, so to get a ratio. I don't know if yours will still hold, but we'll have a look at. So essentially, 500,000 hectares was the upper land that undergoes plague, as we've covered earlier. 1,000 mice per hectare. So that would be obviously the 500 million mice or so, I think, across the 22 million hectares that is currently used in Australia for grain. So over the current use, it's about 22.72 animal deaths per hectare. That's obviously just we're averaging it out over the total grain land use. Yeah, cool. All right. So it's obviously 22.72 animal deaths per hectare by the 3.9 million hectares gives us 88, just under 90 million crop plague eradication related deaths for the rodents, which is obviously way less than the 210 million kangaroos that Archer would require. And obviously Archer's gone.
Yeah. So this shifting to killing kangaroos wouldn't be a feasible strategy if one's goal is to reduce the number of deaths.
Yeah. And just keep in mind that the kangaroo system isn't like a carnivorous system. So Australians aren't fully like obviously carnivorous, we're omnivorous. So you would still have plant-based foods, and the kangaroo deaths and the kangaroo numbers that I've calculated earlier, that just replaces the meat that's consumed in Australia. But Australians are obviously still omnivores, so you'd still have, on top of the 210 million deaths, you'd have the plague, plant-based, the plague eradication deaths that you would need to maintain the omnivorous system that Australia currently abides by. So, yeah.
Okay.
So there's also a statement by Archer, which is kind of silly. So that's the next part. So converting to plant-based, though. So Archer states, I'll just copy this quote into general. Most of Australia's arable land is already in use. I think I've got the actual screenshot. Most of Australia's arable land is already in use. If more Australians want their nutritional needs to be met by plants, our arable land need to be even more intensively farmed. This will require a net increase in the use of fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, and other threats to biodiversity and environmental health. Or if existing laws are changed, more native vegetation could be cleared for agriculture. An area the size of Victoria plus Tasmania would needed to be produce the additional amount of plant-based protein. Obviously, this is just sort of a weird conceptual problem because, if more Australians switch to being plant-based, like we wouldn't need more land. We would just repurpose the land that's currently being used. And based on the fact that you need a lower ratio, you would actually need less land. So that just fails on a sort of conceptual level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a common theme that pops up all the time. Really weird, but yeah, I don't know why it still goes on.
Yeah, so that's kind of a funny one. But yeah, Archer moves on to making statements about Australia's historical land clearing. So he states that since Europeans have arrived on this continent, we've lost more than half of Australia's unique native vegetation, mostly to increase production of monocultures of introduced species for human consumption. Now, he doesn't go on about what they were used for. What part of the reason that this land clearing has occurred is due to the sheep industry, and the deforestation was to create land for sheep and cattle. He also, so he doesn't really make that distinction. This isn't a huge point, but I thought it's worth covering. It's also interesting that recently an article came out pointing out that most of Australia's current ongoing land clearing is actually due to the cattle industry. And in certain areas, it's as much as 94%, but pretty consistently, it's around 60-odd%. I do have the actual article there as well, just in my channel. And probably just getting towards the end. So we've got kangaroo meat health claims. So in the article, Archer actually states, I'll get the direct quote. Sorry. That kangaroo meat produce an exceptionally healthy low-fat meat, and he provides this paper in support. Now, it's not a study. It's essentially just a newspaper article having a discussion with a couple of local, I think, dietary scientists. And in it, they essentially just cover immune response to Wagyu beef, but not kangaroo meat. And that's it. There's no further evidence about why it's exceptionally healthy. And even in the article, they actually state it's too soon to say whether this might matter to our health. So I've just pointed out that it seems to be wrong a claim that Archer has made compared to what even the newspaper article is stating.
I think I'm aware of the study that does this.
Actually,
yeah. I can post it if you'd like. It's actually in my study archives. But here it is. Okay. Here was the study that compared kangaroo meat to Wagyu beef. It actually came up in one of the let's see. It came up in.
Oh yeah, it seems about right. Yeah, it's same.
It came up in the Kresser-Wilkes debate actually.
Okay.
That's where it was used. Yeah. So it did. You know, if the kangaroo meat was compared to Wagyu beef, but I mean the thing is, this is just certain types of information, like they look at interleukin-6 and whatnot. That doesn't come close to exhausting the. Even if you show that there's like a less of an inflammatory response, which is a mechanistic, proxy from kangaroo meat compared to Wagyu beef, it doesn't follow from that it's going to have. First of all, it doesn't follow it's going to have the same effect, compared to non-Wagyu beef, because Wagyu beef is like a very high-fat beef. It's, it could be 25 to 30% fat, of which 40% is saturated, compared to other cuts of beef. And also, it doesn't exhaust the health outcomes. I mean, not all things involve inflammation. There's even non-inflammatory risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So I mean, to base that and say, well, okay, kangaroo meat going to be healthy like beef, like that just doesn't follow.
Yeah, and I think the important part isn't just that he's for me he's kind of misrepresented the health level. So he's stated in his article, quote, "They also produce an exceptionally healthy low-fat meat," and I think the point is that there doesn't seem to be enough evidence to make a claim.
Oh yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, you can't claim that based on that.
Yeah. So that's sort of the point that I want to put across. That is overstating the health claims, and the evidence certainly doesn't back that. Also, just as a side note, I thought it was kind of hilarious that he didn't provide like the actual study, and he's provided this journal, like a paper article. I would have thought he would do better, but because I don't know about you, but
as well.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but because especially if he's a professor, I think even if you're doing a bachelor's in Australia, in a Bachelor of Health Science in Australia, that would probably be close to an instant fail for your assignment if you provided something like that rather than the original article. So you would think he should know better as a professor, but anyway. Yeah.
Oh, it's really weird. Yeah, no, it's a pet peeve for sure.
And I've just covered why I'm still going over this article, even though it's like 10 years old now. It just seems to repeatedly pop its head up every now and then, and I don't know if it's annoying me more because I'm Australian and maybe I just see more of it more often. But I was at an inquiry, a parliamentary inquiry, a couple of years ago before COVID. So what had happened is that on the second anniversary, I think it was, of Dominion, animal rights activists essentially sort of shut down large parts of the city or certain parts of the city. This included in Melbourne, where they essentially blockaded one of the major streets in the city centre to essentially garner attention and to point out the sort of atrocities that were occurring in animal agriculture. There was obviously a bit of a backlash from that, though, and that resulted in a parliamentary inquiry. And there was talks about potential ag-gag laws and very serious criminal laws coming in against animal rights activists. And as part of the inquiry, they brought in animal rights activists and questioned them and farmers as well. But I do have a couple of transcripts where Archer's paper in 2019 comes up. So Bev MacArthur, who is a conservative and very pro-farming and doesn't give a shit about animals, and who apparently didn't bother looking at the animal rights activist submissions or any of the animal slaughter videos that were presented as evidence. She apparently sat there playing on her phone. She did ask and challenge one of the animal rights activists, saying, quote, "Would you like to comment on Mike Archer, professor in the Faculty of Science at the University of New South Wales, who has said that roughly 25 times more sentient beings die to produce a kilo of protein from wheat than a kilo of protein from beef?" And then later on, so these inquiries occurred across the state, and there was probably about 4 or 5 of them. And this came up later on as well. So on the other end, Andy Medic, who is a Animal Justice Party member, who's obviously vegan and pro-animal rights activist, pointed out that the Archer report, has been refuted over 20 times by his peers, and his methodology has been thrown out by as much as 400%. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but it's just to point out that it still comes out as sort of a stick in the mud for a lot of vegans and becomes a bit of a problem.
It's not accurate. Out by as much as 400%. It's actually more than 400%. Because remember, like a factor of 10, it's 1,000%.
Yeah. So that's sort of my motivation for pushing on for this paper, I guess, and even though it's over 10 years old or so. And maybe just as a bit of an update, I might talk to you about this privately, but I did actually contact the Conversation who hosts this article, and I wrote down all of my criticisms, and I put in a couple of edits and a couple of corrections. The most recent of which was the paper by Fisher and Lamy, which I can't remember if you've referenced. But they put in this little note at the end, pointing out that there are errors, or there's a paper that's refuted these claims, but they have not taken the paper down. And I don't think some of the notes that they put on this paper are quite harsh enough. So it might be worth a follow-up. But yeah, I'll talk to you about that maybe privately. So yeah. Do you have any questions, or does anyone else have any questions or any points?
I don't.
Cool. If anyone, no, nothing else. It was quite a bit rambly, so I apologize for that. But if there's anyone that has any questions or want to cover anything, that's fine. But yeah, Avi, otherwise, if you want to head off, that's fine, and I'll cover over something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The bottom line, this is a paper that made like just blatant errors, is off. Its point estimates are off by orders of magnitude. It's just really bad, and it continues to be cited. It continues to be used for political purposes, and I do think it should be taken down. But unfortunately, it is still up. I'm glad you've gotten the editors to mention that. Hey, some other papers have been disputed this, and here's how. But unless there's a response that holds water, I mean, really, I think that should take the paper down. But
yeah,
but that's just me.
Yeah, I might write up something for well, part of the problem with the conversation is it requires a PhD to have something published by the conversation. So yeah, I might talk. That was what I was going to discuss with you. Because if you put in for them to take it down, that will be taken more seriously because you do have really relevant qualifications. But yeah, we can discuss that later.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a PhD. I have an MD, but so I don't know what their rules. Yeah, but I don't. I mean, I haven't met a journal yet that requires a PhD and that will not take an MD. But hey, maybe they're out there.
Cool.
Yeah. We'll see.